This is Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for joining me once again. You probably noticed that the unveiling of the Ferrari Luce EV a couple of weeks ago sent Ferrari aficionados into a rage. And the car has been absolutely savaged on social media. I'm not a fan of it myself, although I know it's a different world these days. But I can't help but think about all the history behind what made Ferrari the greatest sports car manufacturer of all time. So this week I've got one from the vault for you. An interview with Maurice Khawam, who wrote the definitive book on one of Ferrari's most important road cars ever, the 330 GTC. It was a perfect expression of sporting character, luxury, and comfort. But it wasn't a compromise, which is what many people think the Luce represents. Now, if you're not versed in Ferrari, when you're finished with this episode, you will understand why the backlash against the Luce has been so strong. And if you are a Ferrari fan already and you kind of know some of the history, then I think you're probably going to find yourself nodding in agreement because Maurice is a terrific interview. He's just such a wealth of knowledge. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Maurice Khawam, the author of Ferrari 330 GTC, Elegance and Pedigree. Enjoy. Maurice, thank you for having me into your home today. And you're the first Maurice other than me that's been on the podcast. That's kind of a rarity.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Yes, wonderful. Maurice, this book is absolutely masterful. Congratulations. I was blown away by the finished product. So it's just wonderful.
Thank you so much.
The 330 GTC is, I would say, kind of an overlooked Ferrari model in many ways.
I mean,
you could have written a book about the 250 GTO. You could have written a book about the 512 Berlinetta Boxer, some flashier cars, maybe some competition cars. Why the 330 GTC?
That's a very good question. And the answer lies in the fact that Ferrari was a very small manufacturer of automobiles. If you don't mind, I would like to begin by giving you a glance at what Ferrari looked like back in 1966.
Please.
They were established in 1947 in Maranello, and in the 19 years until the 330 GTC became available, they had only produced 4,830 cars. So that's roughly about 250 cars per year. That begs the question is, how could a manufacturer that's producing approximately 250 cars per year survive? And the answer to that lies in racing, believe it or not, because Ferrari was dependent on the monies that he was winning from races. In fact, I want to share one statistic with you that I think you'll find very interesting, and that is from 1960 to 1966, Ferrari won the 24 Hours of Le Mans 6 years consecutively.
Remarkable.
So,
and that's overall win, not just a class win.
It is an overall win. From 1960 to 1965, he won 6 times in a row. And that's a fantastic accomplishment. But then he realized that that's not sustainable. So he needed to do something else.
Also, they were divided. In other words, their resources had to go not just to sports car and endurance racing, but also to Formula One.
Yes, he had to share the revenues with the Formula One team, the engineers, the mechanics. He had a big load on his hands. Because his customers were telling him, hey, look, we need a car that is not as exuberant as the 275 GT before, and is not as staid as the 330 GT2 Plus 2. So why don't you come up with something that, has the performance, but is civilized, that you can live with on a daily basis? And That's how he crafted the 330 GTC. In fact, the 330 GTC was going to start as the 275 GTC because he had the 275 GTB in production, a 275 GTS in production. It was logical that the 275 GTC would fit right in the middle. But then he realized that torque that the engine of the 275 produces is not adequate enough for a car that was not intended to be a race car, but a car for everyday use. That's why he made the decision to go to the larger engine from the 330, and he put it in the 275 GTB chassis effectively, and he came out with the 330 GTC.
We should add a little note here about Ferrari model nomenclature. So the number denotes the
displacement of one cylinder.
Right?
Yeah.
So a 275 would have a 275 cc cylinder displacement, 330, 330 cc, and so on.
Yes.
And
that equates to 330 times 12 is 4 liters.
Right. And we are talking, of course, about V12 engines.
Yes, the Colombo design V12 engines.
Right. And it wasn't the only configuration that Ferrari produced. He played with 4 cylinders, 6 cylinders, 8 cylinders. The 12-cylinder was his favorite.
He did say that. He did say that specifically. He said, I tried them all. I tried the V12, V10, V8, V6, the 6 in line, the 4 in line. But I always came back to the V12.
Do you think it's true that his love for the V12 was based on his witness as a young man to a Packard V12 racing in Europe?
It is true.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting.
Because he had never been exposed to any other V12s except for that Packard engine.
Right. And from then on, it stuck with him.
Yes.
Yeah.
It stuck with him, and then add to that the fact that the engine produces such a beautiful sound, and
yes,
the performance levels, it could be expanded and so on. Excuse me. So I only answered half of your question. And that is why he chose the 330 GTC to put, why I decided to write a book about the 330 GTC. I gave you the racing argument as to why he did that. But there's also another argument, and that is he needed to expand his product line because his product line had a void in it. When the 250 GT Luce went out of production, there was nothing to fill that void. And he quickly realized that his customers were, in fact, correct in that they were asking for a civilized car that they could drive long distances in and not have to resort to sign language to communicate at over 90 miles per hour.
Right. They wanted a refined grand touring car.
Yes. So that gave him the impetus to develop the 330 GTC. And lo and behold, he found out there is a huge market sector for that type of a car.
And Ferrari's market research was very intimate. It was direct feedback from his clients.
Yes. Yes, his clients knew him on a almost first-name basis, and they shared a lot of concerns with him. And he listened.
And Ferrari did not advertise. He didn't need to.
He's averse to advertising.
Right. I think he thought it was beneath him.
No, he thought that the word-of-mouth advertising is the best advertising. So he didn't need to take out expensive ads in magazines.
And that's right. That marketing and advertising is very expensive. Another perhaps apocryphal story, but I think it's true, is that when people visited the factory at Maranello, they were shocked that it was ice cold indoors, and it was because they didn't run the heaters because it cost too much money.
Yes, in fact, they were so tight that Laura Ferrari, his first wife, would go around, pick the screws and nuts off the floor of the factory and put them back in the boxes just to save some money.
And Enzo really didn't care about road cars. He cared only about racing, and the road cars were simply there for another revenue stream. It was a necessary evil to him.
Yes. He in fact, I don't know if you remember reading some of the quotes in the book, but one of them that really stuck with me is that he said outside of racing cars, he has no other interests in life.
That's right.
And that to me is amazing. I mean, this guy had a singular passion. Nothing else interested him except racing cars. So he dedicated his entire life to producing the best racing cars he was capable of.
I did make a note of that quotation. And another one I wanted to share, you wrote in the book that Enzo said, "I don't know what matters more, success or persistence. I have never been a designer nor a calculating individual, but an agitator of men.
Yes.
Sometimes I went too far, but if I hadn't, Ferrari wouldn't be what it is."
Exactly. And if you compare the organizational ambiance of Ferrari compared to Maserati and Lamborghini, you will find that they are completely different, in the sense that those guys at Ferrari are dedicated to one thing, and that is to produce the very best car that they can under the budget and the time constraint that they have to work with. And that's really remarkable, because he was able to instill in them that passion. It was contagious. People that worked at Ferrari, they just wanted to get to work every morning to be able to get their hands on their cars and build them.
Right.
Yeah.
He had a loyal employee base, men that had been with him even since the Alfa Romeo days in the 30s.
Yes. But he treated them very, very well.
Yes.
I mean, whenever they needed anything, he was there for them, and he went out of his way to help them out.
There are stories about Enzo and his largesse, and he did not advertise that. He kept it on the down low, but he would help his employees when they were in trouble, when they needed something.
Yes.
We have this image of Enzo as kind of a hard man. Many of his drivers were put off by him. He set racing drivers sort of against each other. He created these very...
competition.
Yes, this rivalry within the team because he wanted the best out of each of them.
Yes.
Some of them didn't ever get used to that.
Fangio is a good example.
Tell us about that.
Well, he just didn't care about the politics of Ferrari, and he could see straight through Enzo or what he was doing. And Fangio was an exceptional driver, and he didn't need to be treated that way. So, he just walked.
What about Phil Hill?
Well, let me tell you something. Enzo Ferrari, in particular, had something against Americans. I don't know exactly what it was, but he just didn't care too much for them. So when Phil Hill won the championship and they lost the German Count in the accident at Monza,
Von Trips.
Yeah, Enzo Ferrari was turned off, and he just backed away from Phil Hill. Add to that, the team manager at Ferrari didn't care for Phil Hill neither. So that created a lot of friction, and Phil Hill just couldn't put up with it anymore. He just walked away with Kitty and the third guy, and they established ATS.
Hey guys, I want to take a quick break to say if you enjoy Horsepower Heritage, there are a few ways you can support the show. Go to buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and become a patron. There's a link in the show notes. You can make a one-time donation or you can support the show monthly. It's easy, and for the price of a latte, you can help me continue to bring you more of the people and stories behind the machines. You can also leave 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify because that helps new listeners discover the show. Thanks for your support, and now back to the show. So the 330 GTC is unveiled in March of 1966 at the Geneva show. How was it received?
Well, let me tell you, it was a very, very unusual show. Because besides the 330 GTC, Lamborghini unveiled their Miura
That's right.
at the same show, just a few stands away. And at the same Geneva show, Maserati unveiled their Ghibli a few stands away. So it was an uphill battle for Ferrari to go against the mid-engine Miura and the sensational Ghibli. It was a very tough going, but then with time, drivers got behind the wheel of the 330 GTC and they read the road tests, like Paul Frere wrote a fantastic road test on the car, and they became convinced that it's not just looks that sell cars, it's the dynamics. It's about how the car drives, how the car reacts, how the car responds. And slowly he gained market share, and the 330 GTC became a commercial success.
And despite it being a front-engine car, this was kind of a genius move. They put a transaxle in it, which shifted that weight rearward, resulting in a 50-50 weight distribution of the car.
Plus a torque tube.
Yes, a torque tube, right. We're going to talk about some of those technical details as we go along, because I've made note of some of the more interesting developmental, and I really kind of want to get into the technicals in this episode, because I just think the book is so detailed. First of all, we should say I'm fully confident in describing this book as a reference for restorers as well as concours judging.
Yes.
It really is that detailed. And you were fortunate to be able to document the restoration of two 330 GTCs in the course of producing the book.
Yes, that was very fortunate.
Tell me about that process. In a way, that's the backbone of the book.
Yes. So a friend of mine who's has a shop for metalwork told me that he's working on a 330 GTC for a customer from the East Coast. And I asked him, I said, Steve, may I stop by and take a look at the car? He said, yeah, by all means. So I went over, and the car was naked. That means it's completely disassembled. No fenders, no doors, no trunk lids, no nothing. And everything was exposed, the chassis, the suspension, everything. So I said, hey, I got to grab this opportunity. So I started snapping pictures. And I learned a lot, because when you see it, it's different than when you somebody tells you about it.
Sure.
So, and I asked him questions. I asked him tons of questions, and he was, very kind to respond to me. So, I documented that part of the restoration and was very, very happy with it. Then another friend of mine up in Northern California was restoring a 330 GTS. And I said, hey, do you have any photos that you could share with me? And he sends me the CDs chock full with photos, everything. I mean, everything he did to the car, engine, transaxle, suspension, everything. So I looked at it, and I, picked up the phone and started asking him questions too. And before I knew it, I had enough material to cover the restoration from A to Z.
And you mentioned the disassembly of the car, how naked it was. I want to kind of get into some of the design elements. I think we should begin with the chassis.
Yeah.
It's tube and I-beams. There's an X-brace in the center.
Yeah.
So it's not unlike a racing chassis in many ways.
For the period, yes. Like for back then, they essentially used the same layout.
Right. The floor sections of the car were made of fiberglass.
Yes.
For lightness. And this gets into the refined character of the car. Lots of soundproofing and cabin refinements. So it was very quiet compared to other models. You mentioned that earlier. The chassis supplier was a company called Vaccari e Bossi. And this is interesting. Why didn't Ferrari build those in-house?
Oh, because it was a redundant work. And if they had a reliable vendor, why not use them?
Right.
And they're down the street from Maranello.
This sets Ferrari apart from, well, of course, this is an apples and oranges comparison, but I'll do it anyway. So Henry Ford was famous for his vertical integration. Everything was under his roof.
Yes.
or sets of roofs, right? He, early on, decided, I don't want to rely on outside suppliers. Now, of course, you can, again, it's an apples and oranges. Ford production on one day is greater than Ferrari production in a decade, right? So, but my point is that this is two different approaches. I guess Enzo, it made more sense in a small production environment to farm it out.
Yeah, and he did that with the bodies as well. He used Scaglietti, who's also located in Modena, to do the bodies for him.
Right.
It was a very shrewd move, in fact, because he controlled their quality and was not exposed to the financial burdens that they had to go through. Had he built the chassis in house like he was doing before, and the bodies, it would probably have encumbered him too much, because his number of employees would need to be tripled to be able to cope with that demand, and it would have choked him off. So, Vaccari and Bossi they were doing a fantastic job. He was very, very happy with them. So was Scaglietti. So why not spread out the work?
Right. You mentioned Scaglietti. Ferrari was famous since day one for using many different coach builders. Vignale, Scaglietti, Touring, and the most prominent, of course, was Pininfarina.
Correct.
And so the 330 GTC was a Pininfarina design, and they also produced the coach work.
Yes.
Let's talk about a little bit about Battista Farina. So Battista was the boss. His nickname was Pinin. And then later on, they changed the family name from Farina to Pininfarina because
correct.
It became so well known.
Yes.
Right? But interesting guy. He was not an automotive stylist or designer by training. In fact, the company was founded essentially as a body shop way back in the, I think, 1910s.
Yes.
But post-war, they were a premier design house.
Battista Pininfarina and his son Sergio, they had what's called the eye. They knew when a design met the necessary caliber to go into production. They knew when the proportions were right on. In fact, Sergio Pininfarina, in a quote in my book, he says, when the proportions are right, they are right forever. And that's very true.
It is. That's why these designs are considered timeless.
Yes, because you cannot fault them. They're right on.
Yeah, they don't look dated.
Yes.
They can still look very fresh 50, 60 years on.
Yes.
You have a very interesting section in the book with Tom Tjaarda. And, of course, Tom was a Dutch-American car designer. His father had been a car designer. Fascinating story about how he came to Italy to design.
He graduated from the University in Michigan, got a degree in architecture, and his professor asked him to, as a project for graduating, asked him to design something very unusual. So I said, I'd like to design a car. And they went back and forth, and they finally agreed on designing this sports car. Tjaarda worked on the car. And finally, when the car was completed, his professor asked him to bring it over and come over for dinner. It's during that dinner that he revealed to Tjaarda that Ghia in Italy had asked him to send over an American student that could work for, Ghia on car projects. And Tjaarda couldn't believe his ears. He said, yeah, I'll go. So they put him on this ship, and he went over to see his relatives in Holland. As you said, he's Dutch-American. And then after visiting his relatives, he went down to work for Ghia. And he worked for Ghia for quite some time. He actually produced some very nice cars, like the Di Tommaso Mangusta is his work. But he, in the back of his mind, always wanted to work for Pininfarina on Ferraris. And then finally one day, a friend of his told him he knew somebody at Pininfarina and they would put a word for him. And sure enough, Pininfarina asked him to offer them a job. So that's how he, came over to Pininfarina and started working on the cars there.
And he was there for, I think, 9 years or something, and got a real insight into what you were talking about in terms of the proportions and how the Farina father and son had the eye.
Yeah, they had the eye. But what's interesting that Tom Tiarda shares with us in the book is that the Italians had sort of merged with the Greeks that came over to Italy, and the Greeks slowly indoctrinated the Italians into the design and the proportions. And that's why there's a photo of the Parthenon in the book. And I found that to be very fascinating. I thought it was all Italian, but in fact, it is Greek Italian. And he talks in a lot of detail about the importance of proportions and how he used to bring that up with his professors at universities and try to instill in them the necessity to share that with their students. Is that he wanted them to get the students to start thinking about the proportions early on, because that's what makes a very successful design.
I thought that was a great insight into Italian design, because we think of Italian design as very seductive. It's very beautiful. And Italian designers, in fact, have been hired worldwide, whether it's a German car maker or a Japanese appliance maker. They want to beautify their products and they want that Italian eye, but it all stems from the ancient world.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yes. Plus, besides the proportions, the Italians know how to do the fine touches on a design. And, sometimes it's subtle, but it makes a huge difference.
It does.
Case in point, and that's not, I don't want to get away from the subject of the book, but take the Jaguar XJ6, for example. It had a big squarish calendar in the front, and the grille was very, very British, So they called Pininfarina, and Pininfarina refined the grille and tweaked the rear tail lights, and suddenly the car gained 10 years of life in terms of looks, and that it was a commercial success.
No, it's a good point, because a lot of British cars have rather awkward proportions, let's say. They just didn't quite have, there are some standouts here and there, of course, but the E-Type Jaguar, actually Enzo said it was the most beautiful car he'd ever seen.
That's true.
So,
well, he said that also to prod Pininfarina to work hard.
Well, that's very interesting. That's an interesting angle on that. That hadn't occurred to me, but. So in the book, we see into Pininfarina through the eyes of Tom Tiarda. I thought that was a great touch. And he talks about how a gentleman named Francesco Salomone was designing there, and then a gentleman named Aldo Brovarone.
Yes.
And Aldo was actually the guy who was responsible for the Ferrari Superfast and the Ferrari Super America.
Yes. And
design elements of those cars were highly influential on the 330 GTC.
Right. And it was common practice back then to use elements, because I asked Brovarone, you use this nose from this car, the tail end from this car. He said it was common practice back then to use successful components of a design in a new design. Nowadays, it probably would be frowned upon, but back then it was very common practice.
Yeah, and it did establish a design language after all.
Oh, yes.
which we talk about a lot today.
Yes.
Another example that comes to my mind is the Ferrari 330 GTC Speciale that was produced for Princess Lilian of
Belgium.
Belgium. The rear end on that car is very similar to the Ferrari Tre Posti,
Yes.
the taillights and the
Yes.
cam tail, and the flying buttress C-pillars as well.
Right. And the curved rear windshield.
The curved rear windshield, that's
Yes.
right. Again, you can see that in the Ferrari Dino as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that design language was very important. So that paints a little bit of a picture of how the coachwork was designed and produced. We've talked about the chassis already. I think we should probably get into some of the other systems of the car because, again, the book is very detailed. The car had excellent road holding and handling and responsiveness, in large part because of its fully independent suspension.
Yes. Which was really a first because the 275 GTB lent its chassis to the 330 GTC. And the 275 was the very first Ferrari with four-wheel independent suspension. And it was a tremendous movement forward for Ferrari because the cars were transformed because of the four-wheel independent suspension.
Yeah, prior to that, the rear was still on leaf springs and
Yeah, it was very antiquated.
right.
And that's why I argue in the book the reason why I wrote the book about the 330 GTC was because it was the first attempt wholeheartedly by Ferrari to produce a world-class GT car. Unlike the Luce, which had a four-speed transmission and a solid axle in the back, no AC, no electric windows, the car looked sensational. It's very pretty. It still is pretty and probably will be pretty for another 100 years. But try to go on a long-distance trip in a Lusso. It's unlike the 330 GTC that even today you can get in the car. It almost feels like a car that was built in the 2021.
Right. It still feels modern.
So that's why I argue that the car deserved to be brought to the fore, and the book is really a conduit to that, because I wanted to make sure that the readers know that the 330 GTC began a trend at Ferrari to create a bifurcation between road cars and race cars. And he essentially said, okay, I'm building the 330 GTC and I'm going to continue building a line of cars along the 330 GTC specification that are not dedicated or destined for racing. And that created a huge market for him. In fact, his production, annual production, effectively doubled when the 330 GTC became available.
Interesting. So the suspension we said was fully independent, A-arms on all four corners with coils and Koni shock absorbers.
Koni shocks, yes.
Right. And let's talk about the engine. When you discuss Ferraris, you often hear about the Colombo V12, the Lampredi V12. Those are the names of the designers, right? In this case, it was the Colombo. And Gioacchino Colombo had been with Ferrari since day one.
Effectively, yes, he designed the very first V12.
Right. Which was, I think, 2.5 liters, 2 liters?
No, it was less than that. It was like
1.5.
1.5.
Right. In this case, this evolution of the Colombo V12 put it at 4 liters, 300 horsepower, 7 main bearings. It was a long stroke, but it was an under-square engine.
Yes.
That becomes important because it allows for that low-end torque and good drivability at low speed, which you want in a refined road car.
Right.
You don't want to have to wring it out every time.
Like on the 275.
Right. And yet it also allows for high-speed, long-distance touring.
Yes.
This, again, goes to purpose of design.
Yeah, see, the engine in the 330 GTC was never intended to go racing. It was an engine designed specifically for the GT application, and they knew they needed torque, and they knew they needed to kind of limit the RPM so that the engine would not be screaming all the time. And effectively, that engine was never used in a race car, even though there was a Ferrari 330 race car, but not that particular model, not the 330 GTC. So I think one of Ferrari's forte is they know how to tailor make an engine for a specific application, and they are very successful at that.
I mentioned it was an undersquare engine, so 77 millimeter bore, 71 millimeter stroke, aluminum cylinder heads, 2 valves per cylinder, 60-degree V, and hemispherical combustion chambers, which had become popular in the U.S. in the 1950s, and Enzo and Gioacchino Colombo saw that. They adopted that technology. Aluminum pistons, dual overhead cam, and triple Webers.
Yes. And that did the job. I mean, they were very happy with the output of the engine. The torque curve was nice, and the engine performed very reliably. They never had a problem. And Enzo tested that engine in the prototype, and he drove the piss out of that car before he released it for production.
In fact, Ferrari's test drivers would run the cars in the hills around Maranello. The Italian road system was their test track, really, in many ways.
Yes.
And if you see a Ferrari with an Italian license plate that says Prova on it,
right?
What does that mean?
Prova is test.
Right.
That's the Italian word for test. It's like when you go to your tailor who's making your suit,
right?
You'd go for a prova.
You're proving.
Yeah.
You're proving the car. Yeah.
So they had these license plates that said prova.
Right.
Just to satisfy the carabinieris, the police.
The carabinieri won't bother you
exactly
with those plates.
But, I mean, they would not bother Ferrari anyways.
Right.
They just wanted to show that they abided by the law.
Right.
And they did the right thing. So, the test drivers would take the car up the hills and come back and say, you need to tweak this and fix that and whatever. And then they did all this, and then they inspected the car one last time. If they found any flaws in the paint or road chips, they sent it to a special department at Ferrari. And there's a photo of that in the book, where the guy with his lights would, shine on the car and try to, fix everything, do the paint correction, and then they would release the car. One of the things that they did is they paid very close attention to the finish of the car. And they had these inspectors would come over and take a look at the finish and the body gaps and all this stuff. And if they found anything, they would squawk it and tell the guys to fix it. And then they would take the car into a special area in the factory, shine special lights on the car, and do the paint correction, and then release the car. But they always put a sticker on the back of the rear view mirror with the chassis number of the car, and that signified that the car is ready to go.
Right. And when the motoring press finally did get a hold of the 330 GTC, they considered it the best road-going Ferrari ever built.
Yes.
And so there's the magic of it that, inspired you to write this book. What about your personal experiences with the 330 GTC? I'm really interested in that.
Yes. Very good question. So I had a friend of mine who was very close, who had a 330 GTC. And one day he told me, he said, would you like to drive with me up to Monterey for the weekend? For the car weekend. I said, Chuck, well, of course I would. He said, yeah, but you have to bring some wine. I said, okay, yeah, I'd bring some wine, no problem. So I, selected 12 bottles and And we got in the car and drove up there. And at St. Louis Obispo, he gave me the keys and he said, "You drive the rest of the way to Monterey." And that was my first experience with the 330 GTC. And I had, I had a Dino and I had driven 250 GTEs and so on. So I was familiar with the Ferrari, but the 330 GTC was a revelation. Chuck was a very heavy set guy. He was 250 pounds, and the trunk was chock full with wine and everything else. And I drove this car, and this car is just like, it's like we were on rails. I couldn't believe it. So we spent the weekend in Monterey. We had lots of fun. And the night before, I went to bed, and I thought Chuck was going to go to bed too. But instead, Chuck went out to the balcony and finished the rest of the wine. So the following morning, I looked at him. It's like, "Chuck, are you okay?" He said, "No, I'm not."
Not okay.
I said, "Chuck, but we have to drive back to LA." He said, "No, you're driving back to LA."
Oh,
So,
well, that was a blessing in disguise.
it was. So I got him in the right seat, started the car up, and drove to LA. I was doing 90 to 100 miles per hour on the 101.
Yeah.
In fact, I passed the cop at 90 miles per hour.
Did you really?
And he didn't pull me over.
He probably appreciated the car.
So I thought it was a good omen. So I couldn't believe what the dynamics of the car were. This was a fantastic machine.
And you had driven. You had a basis for comparison.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I timed the drive at 5 hours, including a stop for gas along the way.
And that's Monterey to Greater Los Angeles.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I dropped him off, parked the car, and couldn't get that experience out of my mind.
Yeah.
And I started doing research. I'm a very, research-oriented guy. So I started looking into the car, and it's like, wow, and this is a sleeper. And Chuck had paid $85,000 for the car, and now the car is worth $485,000.
Amazing.
And it left a lasting impression on me. And when I found out that it shared the chassis with the 275 GTB, and it had the bigger motor and the transaxle and the torque tube and all the other goodies, it was time for me to bring it to the fore and let people know about it.
Right. Now, the car wasn't without its imperfections. There were some early deficiencies, like it was overheating. To correct that, the factory added a pair of oil coolers initially.
Yes.
Because they had relied on
the fins,
cooling fins on the sump cover to cool. It just wasn't adequate. So they added those twin oil coolers, and then they even refined it more with an integrated oil cooler and radiator.
Correct.
Which helped greatly, and then that solved the cooling issues. There were also some drive shaft vibrations. How did they correct that?
Well, the 330 GTC really did not have the vibrations that, like, let's say, the 275 GTS had, because they knew that the solution of the torque tube was really a final solution.
Because it made it all very rigid.
Absolutely. And it eliminated any issues with the transaxle not being lined up with the engine and so on. So they adopted the torque tube from day one on the 330 GTC.
There were also some U-joint failures and some shock mount cracks in the front suspension A-arms.
Yes.
They sent out a
recall.
A technical recall.
And it wasn't really called the recall back then. They sent out a bulletin through their importer, Luigi Chinetti.
Right.
And Luigi Chinetti came up with, the schematics as to where the welding needs to be added onto the shock tower to eliminate the cracks. And believe it or not, I still come across 330 GTCs today that haven't had that fix done.
Yeah, that is an interesting aspect of when you're tearing a car down for restoration, you witness that, oh, these have these reinforcing plates welded in.
Yeah.
You don't see them on some cars.
Yeah.
They never got it, but
Right.
so it wasn't, the cracks didn't appear in all cars necessarily, but there was enough of a problem where they needed to
Yeah.
issue a technical bulletin. You mentioned Luigi Chinetti, and I think we should tell people how significant he was to Ferrari.
I mean, he effectively put Ferrari on the map in the United States because Ferrari didn't speak English. They only had one guy, Amerigo Manicardi, I think was his name, who was their liaison with the U.S. market. But they didn't have a presence in the States. So here was Luigi Chinetti, who had the presence in the United States. He had a team of people that spoke English, and he, of course, spoke Italian. So it was natural for Enzo Ferrari to work with Chinetti, who was a dear friend of his. And Chinetti had won the Le Mans race for him, so he was quite well established with Enzo, of course, on a first-name basis. And that's how it grew.
And Chinetti, of course, is famous for the North American racing team, NART.
NART.
It's almost like an arm of Scuderia Ferrari.
Yes.
NART winning many Sebring and Daytona races, and racing also in Europe, racing at Le Mans.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, very important guy.
Yeah, he was instrumental in not only spreading the word about Ferrari, but being there with the product and showing it off to American customers and let them test it, let them, feel it and understand why Ferrari is different than any other car out there.
And Chinetti was also influential in the product line.
Yes, of course. He opened up the eyes of Enzo Ferrari to the U.S. market, especially in California, and how Enzo Ferrari needs to look into making more convertibles for the U.S. market. And that's how he talked him into making the 275 GTB 4 into a GTS 4.
And in fact, there were 330 GTC convertibles.
Yes. They produced 99 of those cars. And 2 of them were right-hand drives. But the car now is very, very revered and was very well received back then, and still garners a lot of attention wherever it goes.
What was the total production run for the 330 GTC?
They produced and sold 597 cars.
Okay, so that's just a drop in the bucket compared to most manufacturers. I began by saying the 330 GTC is kind of an overlooked Ferrari. And in fact, many of them have been scavenged to produce replicas of other, let's say, more famous Ferraris. And one of the reasons for that is the 330 GTC for a long time was not worth a great deal of money.
That's right.
Compared to a 250 Le Mans, a 275 GTB.
But that was the fate of the previous models as well.
Yes.
Like the 250 GTs and GTEs. A lot of them were sacrificed and turned into more desirable looking Ferrari.
Right.
But not anymore.
No, they finally have their day. Now, by 1968, they have the successor ready. It's the 365 GTC, now a larger displacement, 4.4 liter V12.
Correct.
And they only built 200 of those.
No, they built less than that.
Less than that. Okay.
They built 150.
150.
And 20 convertibles. The reason why they produced so few of those was because Enzo Ferrari did not want to export the car to the U.S. market because it required a lot of anti-smog equipment to be produced specifically for that car. And he knew that the days of that model were limited because the Daytona was around the corner. So they only produced 150 of the coupes and 20 of the convertibles.
from a collector's point of view, what is more desirable, a 330 GTC or a 365?
I don't think that the engine displacement is such a big issue. I think what's more important is the condition of the car and the history of the car. Has it been well taken care of, well maintained, driven, or is it shoved in a corner in a garage with a bunch of closed basket on top of it and forgotten for years? Because that makes a big difference in the desirability of the car.
As is true for many classic cars, the worst thing you can do to a vintage Ferrari is let it sit.
Yes.
You have to drive them.
Yes, you kill it by letting it sit.
Right.
Slow death.
Maurice, let's backtrack for a moment, because I think we blew by some of the styling elements of the car. I mentioned the Ferrari Superfast and Super America, but they have a very distinctive, I would call an ovoid grille.
Yeah, elliptical grill.
Elliptical grille,
Yeah.
and these split stiletto bumpers.
Yes.
And a nice sloping nose, low headlights, very distinctive look. So those elements came from the Superfast and Super America, but what are some of the elements of the 330 GTC that were developed to make it, as we say, proportional and that eye?
If you compare, for example, the trunk area of the 330 GTC to that of the 330 GT 2+2, you will see that on the 330 GTC it is much more refined, downsloping, and it seems to occupy less volume, and that imparts a look of finesse to that particular model. The other thing is, and a lot of people regret that they didn't transfer that design element to the 365, are the vents on the fenders. Those vents, even though in my opinion, are not very adequate in extracting heat from the engine compartment, they looked the part. They looked fantastic. And Pininfarina decided to delete them and replace them with openings on the engine cover, engine lid. And effectively, he was right, because those extractors were much more efficient in extracting heat from the engine than the side vents, because heat, as you know, rises. So when it rises and it finds an opening, it gets out, it escapes. Whereas on the side vents, it has to work its way into the engine compartment to get to those vents and escape. But there's also another important element of those openings on the engine lids, and very few people know about this. And that is, when a car drives on the road, the pressure underneath the car is higher than the pressure above the car, effectively creating lift. Where with those openings on the engine lid, they equalize the pressure underneath the car and above the car. So the lift goes away, so the car gets better road holding overall.
Now, that wasn't intentional. It was kind of a happy accident, right?
Well, it was at a time when those things were being discovered.
Right. Ground effect and downforce, right? All of that.
Lift, positive lift, negative lift.
Yeah.
But it worked. It worked great.
Right. You talk about the belt line crease of the 330 GTC,
yes.
And it's more than just a styling cue.
Yes. It effectively breaks the profile of the car into two halves, the upper half and the lower half. And it takes away from the monotony of just having one single slab-sided part of the car. And because of that crease, it creates different lighting on the body of the car. So the upper part of the body is lit more than the lower part of the body, which makes the car appear to sit a little lower.
It seems self-evident that you would want to see a car in the light, but you talk about in the book how they were very careful to pull the cars out into the sunlight at Pininfarina and look them over very carefully. And when they presented a car to Enzo Ferrari, he never approved anything quickly.
First time.
Right.
Yeah.
He needed to live with it for a while.
Yes. He needed to live with the design, feel it, and, go back to Sergio Pininfarina and discuss some items and go back and forth. And Sergio Pininfarina caught on about how Enzo Ferrari approached the design critique of a particular car. So he developed this extra patience to work with the man. And he knew that eventually, if his design was right on, that Enzo Ferrari would acquiesce and approve of the design.
A couple of the other elements of the 330 GTC that are interesting. First of all, the greenhouse is very light, and that is owing to very thin pillars.
Yes.
A, B, and C. It gives it an airy feel. It lowers the car in a sense visually, the perception of the car. Another element is at the rear of the car, below the level of the trunk lid and tail lamps, it flows back towards the front.
Yes.
It's a compound curve back towards the front, which, again, finishes it in a refined way.
Yes.
It's pinched in.
It's tucked in, yes.
Right.
Yes. From an aerodynamic point of view, it's really not very effective to have that kind of a compound curve moving forward towards the nose of the car. What you want is a vertical surface, also known as a camtail, that would help the car and the shed vortices from the car dissipate, so it will not create a lot of drag. But, Pininfarina, they did not have their wind tunnel available to them. They were building it as 330 GTC went into production. So they did things using models, and they tested those models at the wind tunnel at the University of Turin. And I have a few photos of the models hanging from the ceiling with wires and how they tested them. Models are okay to give you a general idea, but they don't point out specific problems. A case in point, if you go to the chapter in the book that talks about aerodynamics, you will see that when we use those cotton tufts on the car, everything looked very, very smooth from the nose on to the beginning of the rear windshield. And then, when we hit the rear windshield, all hell broke loose. And the reason why was because the gasket that they used for the rear windshield protruded into the airstream. It was about maybe 3/4 of an inch sitting proud of the roofline. So when the airstream, which was very weak at that point because it had traveled from the nose of the car up the front windshield, onto the roof, all the way to the back where it was very weak, got tripped by that gasket, the airflow separated. And you could see the tufts curling on the rear windshield. See, a model would not be able to tell you that because it's way too small.
Right.
You have to have the real
full scale
body sitting in the wind tunnel to be able to see this.
People will be familiar with what we're talking about, but just in case, think of little strands of yarn taped on every surface of the car, every few inches, and that yarn is affected by the airstream, and it shows areas of smooth airflow and areas of turbulent airflow.
It's called flow visualization.
Right. And it was illustrated in the film Ford v. Ferrari when they were toying with the design of the GT40. That there was a scene where Ken Miles is driving it, and they've got it covered in strands of yarn to show the airflow.
Yes.
So, but in the book, it's illustrated very nicely with a series of photos. You have the car set up with the telltales all over, and there are separate photographs for, the car driving with the windows up, the windows down,
Yes.
and it shows the flow. Very interesting.
Right. It's an subject that's dear to me.
Right, because you have a background in aerospace.
Yes, and I wanted to illustrate when they say, "Oh, the body of the car was very refined, was very aerodynamic," and so on. I wanted to show the reader what is meant by that.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting, and I would say that the 330 GTC is a very conservative design, but it's also part of what makes it so fresh even today.
Yes, I think adding to that that the proportions were right on the car from the get-go.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Now, there were also, in addition to the standard production cars, there were quite a few 330 GT specials that went to prominent clients. For example, Princess Lilian of Belgium, whom we mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Sergio Pininfarina owned a special.
Yes. It was a car that he bought from Ferrari to test some of his ideas on how to refine the design. Some of the things that he did, where he improved the heating system inside the cabin to give the passenger his own temperature control, while the driver kept his.
Pretty innovative for the day.
Yeah, very innovative. The air outlet on the hood were tested on that car. They also tested additional lights, pop-up lights. They called them supervis, or for supervision, that they would just turn on when the outside conditions were, necessitated additional lighting.
Yeah, they're just auxiliary lamps.
Yeah.
I love how they're hidden in the front panel of the nose. You don't even really notice them, but then when they pop up, they're also quite elegant. They look good up or down, is what I'm trying to say.
And they're very, very complicated. I have a friend of mine who owned that Pininfarina car that you mentioned, and when they first got it, they didn't know that those lights were, on the car.
Is that right?
Yeah, because the car had changed color from dark blue to silver, and they painted that panel. By chance, they were tapping in that area or whatever, and they realized that something is odd. So they decided to investigate, and they found out that there indeed were lights in that particular area. So they contacted Pininfarina and add the letters of correspondence with Pininfarina on that particular subject. And Pininfarina confirmed that, yes, indeed, there were lights in that area. Now, try to replicate those lights when you have no plans, no nothing. Fortunately, they found a guy who owned Ferrari that had used those exact light, but a different model, who was willing to lend the car so that the fabricator could make those pieces for them.
Very interesting. A couple other prominent owners. Dr. Michael DeBakey, who was a pioneering heart surgeon, cardiologist in the United States, and Pietro Barilla, the Italian pasta magnate.
King, yeah. And then the fourth guy that very few people know about is Dr. Franco Di Palma, who was a personal friend of Ferrari. He owned a bunch of pharmacies, and that was his domain, pharmacology. And he advised and helped Enzo Ferrari when Dino was sick, trying to procure some of the medication that Dino needed.
Oh, terrible. Yeah. Muscular dystrophy is what killed Dino Ferrari.
So he asked Enzo if he could have a speciale, and Enzo, without any hesitation said yes.
Of course. So the production run of the 365 GTC ended in 1969.
Yes.
And Ferrari's character and design changed quite a bit from that point forward?
A lot. The design language was taken over by Leonardo Fioravanti, and he, decided to get away from this elliptical inlets and round 7-inch headlights and do something very, very unusual. And he was quite successful. And let me tell you why he was successful. It's because he combined two disciplines that are, in my view, essential for successful designs. Number one, he was a talented designer. He knew how to draw cars. But the other thing is that he was a trained aerodynamicist. So he knew what works and what doesn't work. And sure enough, when he designed the 365 GT before the Daytona, they went out testing it on the autostradas in Italy. The car didn't exhibit any of the anomalies other cars like the Miura, who had the nose lift at over 150 miles per hour, and the car was very, very stable. And the reason why it was stable was because the guy who designed it was a trained person in that particular design.
In aerodynamics.
In aerodynamics.
Yeah. And this was the advent of the wedge car era. And not just for Ferrari, but for other Italian manufacturers, Maserati, Lamborghini, but also worldwide, really.
Yeah.
People like Marcello Gandini, Giovanni Michelotti, it was their heavy influence that prompted a lot of those changes.
Yes.
Maurice, you also profile many Ferrari 330 GTC owners in the book, and you gave them an opportunity in their own words to talk about the ownership and driving experience.
Right. And I thought it was essential to have that chapter in the book. And the reason is I wanted to make the book
personal.
No, I wanted a lot of people to relate to the cars and the book. So I figured, if I have a lot of people talk about their experiences of ownership, of driving the car, and put that in the book, I effectively would have accomplished an objective of making the book about people and the cars.
I think you've done it. Yeah, it's got a nice personal connection in that section of the book. And of course, in addition to hundreds of period photographs and new photographs, for example, of the restoration process, and many, many archival documents, correspondence between Ferrari, Chinetti, Pininfarina, and so forth, you also have cataloged all of the chassis numbers.
Yes.
Including the production dates, specifications, color
combinations. Yeah.
Yeah, right. All of that. And you have a wonderful several pages of all of the standard colors available as well as all of the optional colors available.
Right.
That was fantastic. That must have been a little bit difficult to produce.
To produce or to generate.
Right.
It was very difficult from a sense of coming up with the right color. For example, I had the very a hard time with yellow because, have you heard of Yellow Man of War?
I never have until I saw the book.
I know, but it was one color that was offered, and one car was produced in that particular color. Try to find a Yellow Man of War. It was like, looking for a needle in a haystack. But, I persisted, and I finally came across a car with that color.
Maurice, this isn't your first publication.
No.
We should mention you are also the publisher.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
This is not my full-time job, by the way.
Well, of course not. Yeah. Certainly this is a labor of love. You're not getting rich off these books. However, I will say they are so artfully done. The layout, we should give credit to the gentleman who laid the book out.
Yes, Mr. Lee Lanier. He was very, very patient, even though it's not in his character to be patient.
Well, Lee, if you're listening, you did a marvelous job.
Yeah. I had interviewed lots of people for this particular task. And, I'm a very fastidious guy. And I couldn't find anybody who I was comfortable with taking on this monumental task. And I finally came across Lee, and we got on talking, and he told me that he got his master's degree in art design from San Francisco. That was the clincher, because I believe in education, and I knew that this guy had the touch, the feel, and the know-how to take on this task. And he proved it, because I made a lot of tweaks as we went along, and he delivered every time. So I was very happy.
I can imagine you're hopeful that everyone who owns a 330 GTC will order a copy of the book. How many are you going to produce?
Well, we've produced 75 of the anniversary edition. They're almost sold out. I had Paolo Pininfarina, before he passed away, write the foreword for the book, which to me was a huge plus, because they don't respond. You send them letters. I mean, even if you knew the Pope, they would not budge. So I have a friend of mine who worked with them, and he was a good client. And I don't want to mention names, but I asked him, I said, do you think you can ask Paolo to write the foreword of the book? He said, yes, of course. So, he picked up the phone and asked him. And he said, yeah, I'll write the foreword of the book. Just send me a little synopsis of what the book is about. And I emailed it to him. And sure enough, he wrote it. And I went back and asked him for his photos and his signature to put in the book as well.
Wonderful. Well, it's these little details that really set a book apart. I should mention, it weighs 15 pounds.
I know.
It's monumental in more ways than one, but
yes. Monumental is a great way of describing it.
Well, thank you. Maurice, thanks for doing this today. It's really been a treat.
It's really a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving a voice to my book. I really appreciate it, and I can tell by the questions that you have that you actually went through the book.
Oh, every page. Absolutely. I go through.
I'm very happy about that.
Cover to cover. The book is called Ferrari 330 GTC, Elegance and Pedigree by Maurice Khawam.
Correct.
Thank you, my friend. And if people want to order, I'm going to put a link in the show notes, but tell them where to get the book.
You can get it on the website, Mac Group Books, MAK Group, GROUP, books, plural.com.
Very good. Maurice, thank you.
It's a pleasure, Maurice.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. Support the podcast at buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage. Throw a few bucks in the gas tank. You can find more on the YouTube channel and Instagram. And if you enjoy the show, leave me a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And until next time, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.